All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a massive geographical road trip from the very top of the Indian subcontinent all the way down to the bottom. We're going to see how mountains are basically the master architects of the region's rivers, its climate, and honestly, its entire history. We so often just look at mountains as these big static piles of rock, but today, we're going to see how they're actively shaping the destiny of over 1 billion people. Okay, let's just jump right in with a totally mind-bending question. Did you know that 500 million years ago, the exact spot where the world's highest peaks currently stand was literally just water? It was the vast Tethys Sea. I mean, it sounds like straight-up science fiction, right? But the very top of the world today was actually the bottom of the ocean, back during the Cretaceous period, when the global map looked completely different than it does now. So how did we get here? Well, it's the result of an absolutely epic journey. The Indian tectonic plate literally broke off from the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana, drifted north for millions of years, and then slammed into the Eurasian plate in this massive, slow-motion collision. This process of mountain building folded the Earth's crust. And the craziest part, that collision is still happening, pushing those mountains a little bit higher every single year. So here's the roadmap for our journey today. We're going to trace the literal birth of the Himalayas, scale the mighty northern peaks, visit a super ancient guardian range, unpack this crazy geological sandwich in central India, and finally, head down south to check out the massive coastal walls of the Ghats. Right, let's kick things off way up in the extreme north, taking a look at how these giant peaks went from the bottom of the sea to the literal summit of the world. So the Himalayas are what geologists call fold mountains. Basically, when that Indian plate rammed into Eurasia, the pressure was so unimaginably intense that it just crumpled and folded the ancient seafloor right up into the sky. And the proof is actually right there in the rocks. If you look at the dark rocks high up in the greater Himalayas, you'll actually find ancient marine fossils. Literally, the remains of sea creatures from the Tethys Sea, just sitting up there in the clouds. It's a pretty wild reminder of how much our planet shifts and changes. But here's the thing you really need to take away from this. These mountains are not just pretty scenery. They have some serious jobs to do. They act as this gigantic active shield that completely blocks the freezing dry winds that blow down from Siberia, which keeps the whole subcontinent warm. In the summer, they act like a giant net, catching the moisture-heavy monsoon clouds and forcing them to drop their rain. Plus, their massive glaciers feed the region's biggest rivers with fresh water. They're basically an indestructible natural fortress keeping the whole ecosystem running. Okay, moving a bit deeper into the north, we run into the true giants of the region, the peaks that literally define the skyline of Asia. If you're scanning a map from top to bottom, you get this incredibly distinct sequence of ranges that form the Trans and Lesser Himalayas. Starting way up top, you've got the Karakoram. Then, stepping down south, you hit Ladakh, Zanskar, Pir Panjal, and finally Daladar. And the way these mountain walls are stacked, they beautifully frame these lush valleys right in between them, like the famous Kulu Valley, which sits perfectly nestled between Daladar and Pir Panjal. And we literally can't talk about this region without mentioning the undisputed king. Towering at an unbelievable 8,848.86 meters, we have Mount Everest, or as it's beautifully known in Nepal, Sagarmatha. But hey, let's not sleep on the runner-up. Sitting right at 8,611 meters up in the Karakoram range is K2, which historically goes by Godwin Austen. While Everest takes the global crown, K2 proudly holds the title of the absolute highest peak in India. All right, let's leave the snowy young giants behind and travel down to the western side of the country. We're going to meet a deeply weathered veteran of a mountain range, the ancient defender of Delhi. We're talking about the Aravalli Range. Now, this is the textbook definition of what's called a relict mountain, or Avashisht Parvat. Millions and millions of years of just relentless wind, water, and weather have completely worn it down. So what might have once been a massive jagged peak has been reduced to what looks more like just modest rolling hills today. But get this, the sheer age of this range is staggering. It's 570 million years old. That makes the Aravalli one of the oldest mountain ranges on the entire planet. We're talking about a time way before dinosaurs even existed. Geologists actually believe that in its prime, the Aravalli was taller than the Himalayas are right now. Just let that sink in for a second. And don't let its eroded size fool you because it has an absolutely crucial job to do even today, stretching all the way from Gujarat up through Rajasthan and Haryana and ending in Delhi. It acts as a literal physical shield. It blocks the advancing sands of the Thar Desert. If this ancient guardian wasn't there, all that sand would just blow eastward, and Delhi and western UP would be swallowed up into a barren wasteland. Moving right along as we drop further south into the heart of India, the geography gets really interesting. We hit what's essentially the great divider of the subcontinent. Right in the middle, we find the ancient Vindhyachal Range, and it quite literally slices the map right in half. For centuries upon centuries, it's acted as this formidable historical wall, separating the cultures, the languages, and the climates of North India from the south. And it creates this super unique geographical setup we like to call the VNST formula. Think of it exactly like a massive geological sandwich. On the top bun, you've got the Vindhyachal Mountain. Right below that is the Narmada River. But the Narmada isn't in some normal valley. It's flowing through a deep rift valley, which is basically a giant crack in the Earth's crust. Underneath that river is the Sadpur mountain range. And finally, the Tapti River makes up the bottom. It's just a perfectly stacked natural sandwich. Okay, finally, let's head down to the V-shaped peninsular south, where the coastline is defined by these massive protective walls known as the Ghats. The contrast here is just wild. On one side, the Western Ghats act as this continuous, unbroken mountain fortress standing tall against the Arabian Sea. They trap all those incoming monsoon clouds, guaranteeing India gets its vital rain. But on the flip side, the Eastern Ghats are totally broken up and chopped into pieces. Because the Deccan Plateau actually tilts to the east, these incredibly powerful, ancient rivers, like the Godavari and the Krishna, have spent millions of years slicing right through the eastern mountains to get to the Bay of Bengal. So, what happens when these two totally different mountain walls eventually meet? Well, at the very bottom of the peninsula, they crash into each other at a genuinely spectacular meeting point, the Nilgiri Hills, which you might know as the Blue Mountains. It's world famous for its incredibly lush tea gardens, and it's marked by Dodha Betta, a towering peak right where the east and west converge. Now, Dodha Betta is huge, no doubt, but the actual tallest peak in South India is tucked just a bit further down in the Anaimalai Hills. Standing at a majestic 2,695 meters is Anamudi. To put that massive scale into perspective for you, Anamudi is almost 3 times as tall as the Burj Khalifa, just rising straight out of the dense southern forests. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. Think back on everything we've just covered. If these mountain master architects weren't here, if they weren't shaping the flow of the rivers, stopping the desert sands, and catching the mighty monsoon, what would this land even look like? Would India just be a rainless, barren desert with a completely different history? It really proves that geography doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It literally writes the story of our world. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey.